Got a rotovator here with a Briggs and Stratton 190cc engine. Now the problem with it is, and it's a simple enough engine, there's a choke, as you can see, and it's pretty much fast speed or slow speed and a stop. There's up at the bars here, there's a clutch mechanism for the tillers at the bottom. Now the problem with this is that when you try and crank it, it won't start. Now if I squirt some oil, I'll show you in a few minutes, or squirt some petrol into the carburetor, it kicks. It does go for maybe a second and cuts out again. So what I know is it's not a spark plug problem, because it does spark, but because the spark plug is only €3, it's always, if you're going to do anything with these engines, but put in a new spark plug anyways. Although in this case I do know that it's not a spark plug issue. If it kicks, it's usually a fuel supply or an air supply problem. So we're going to take a look at that. Now what I do off camera, I'm going to take the plastic cover off the top. There's a screw here and a screw here. So I'm going to take that off. We'll also take off the air filter, and the air filter it takes off. You just open up this screw here, just screw that out, and I'll show you in a few minutes. We'll take off the air filter. Just first up on tools you need, it's actually very simple. You need a spark plug remover. Actually I happen to have one in the socket set. Screwdriver. I find this very handy. It's got a 8, 9 and 10 socket. You need plenty of WD-40, and what I also use, now you can vary, I got an air line here with a very small nozzle on it. This is to clean out some of the little pipe work that's in the carburetor. We'll see that in a few minutes. Now you don't need to have an air hose. If you've got some sort of a wire or something that can go in the holes and clear them out, that's fine, but I'm going to use an air compressor with a very small nozzle on the end. So very few tools needed. Okay, first job is we're going to take off the air filter. This is a very handy little gadget, because every single socket I need is on it. So just open up this nut here. It doesn't actually come off altogether. Okay. Now once you have it off, and just check it. This is a rotovator that do get dusty. So you can see, but that's not too bad. It's clean enough. Just leave that aside. We'll also take off this plastic cover. It's just 2 screws holding it in. Got the starter cord. Let's leave that aside. This particular engine, it doesn't have a little primer button. It's blanked off. You can see it at the front. If you have a primer button at the front, one of the little squidgy things, you need to be careful about the next step. What we do is there's, let's see, 1, 2, there's 3 bolts to be taken off here. Let's take them off first. Now even if your rotovator is not giving you any trouble, or in fact this is a similar engine that you would get on a lawnmower or in many other things. Briggs and Stratton, you find them on hundreds of different small tools. Okay, now if you have a little squidgy button here, that's the bit. Taking this off, you just need to be careful if it's stuck, and the reason is there is a little gasket. It's actually here on the carburetor itself. Okay, it's kind of rubber sort of. It's a rubber gasket. It goes on, seals around here. Now, it's also a good idea to give that a clean. The way the primer works is that when you press this, it squirts in oil. The holes are here, but it's sealed up. If you break that gasket or damage it, when you prime, potentially your petrol will come out. So don't have a problem with mine, but just something to be aware of. Okay, this unit here, this is the carburetor. Now the next thing we need to do, actually a tool I forgot to mention, so before you do anything else, is we need to crimp the fuel line. So I just want to get some tools for that. So I just put on a vice grips underneath. Just be careful you don't damage it. Okay, and while I'm here, I can also take off the fuel line from the carburetor. So there's a little clip there, you just squeeze it together, and then we can remove the fuel line from the carburetor like that. There, there'll be a small spill of petrol. Okay, so the next job is to remove. There's two bolts. What size are they? Okay, they're a 10mm bolt. There's two of them, which connect the carburetor to the engine block. And this is where this tool comes into its own, because it is quite tight around here. And some socket sets, certainly ones that I have, they don't fit in here, but this does the trick. Okay, and now we can detach the carburetor from the head, or from the engine head. Now what you need to watch here, there's a little piece of wire which connects basically the throttle here to the carburetor. You just need to disconnect that, and it's two bolts. So this is our carburetor. Now what happens is that dirt gets built up in these or gets blocked. There are little small holes here where fuel needs to flow through, and they can get blocked with bits of dirt. So the next thing we need to do once we've taken off is we need to remove this nut here at the bottom. Now this bowl here is full of petrol. So I'll do this off camera, but all I'm going to do is open up this nut here, because some petrol is going to spill out, and I don't want it spilling all over the place here. I may need to get a socket for this, I do. So I'm going to do this away from the camera. It's just a matter of opening up that brass bolt there. Okay, I've removed that brass bolt. Now it's not an ordinary brass bolt. Now you can see in the camera here, there are tiny little holes in that. Now I can see through them, but I'm going to clean those out as well. And there's a little rubber washer. It's a very important piece piece of the carburetor. We'll just leave that aside, we'll clean it up later on. So what's inside here? So that's the bowl, and before we put it back on, we'll give that a good clean. Just clean all the dirt off the inside. It's not so much dirt, but sort of petrol residue. Inside then we have a float. This is the float inside the carburetor. And what we're going to do here, there's a little pin which connects the float. So sometimes you can pull them out with your fingers, sometimes you need to use the pliers. Be very careful, some things could go flying. Just pull out that little pin, leave it aside, and then we take that off. And then what we have, just be careful at this point, little piece of metal here, and that's called the needle. Okay. Now all of these things we're going to give them a good clean. So we've got our float and we've got our needle. Just leave them aside. And what we also have, it's going to be really hard to see on the camera, but down inside that hole there, there's a little rubber washer. Now I'm looking in at it, and although the recommended thing to do would be to replace that, I don't have one to hand. Now if you are going to replace it, I'll show you a little trick. I'm just going to screw. Okay, so if we need to take out that rubber washer down there, get a self-tapping screw like this one here. Just push it down into that, then half a turn. It'll be enough to grip the rubber washer. Pull it out, then get your replacement and push it back in again. Once you take it out, you can't put it back in again. So only take it out if you have a replacement to hand. So again, you push in the screw, half a turn, pull out, pop on the new one, push in, and half turn back the other way to take it out again. I'm not going to do that. I think it looks okay. Now at this point we're going to clean our carburetor. And the most important thing when you're cleaning is that these little holes here inside, these bring fuel around the carburetor. We need to make sure they're not blocked. Now, if you don't have access to a compressor, you could use pipe cleaner or maybe a piece of wire, something to get in there to clean those guys out. Now what I'm going to use, back again, is some WD-40, it's great, it gets everywhere, is to blow some WD-40 through the hole. So I've got a compressor with a very small nozzle here, and just carefully go over here. As you can see, just make sure that we see the WD-40 coming out. That looks good. Into the fuel line here, down there, and go around. So just clean out everything like that. All of these, especially the most important ones, are these ones here, either side of this butterfly valve. So just make sure they're clean, because more than likely your problem is that they're blocked. That's why your engine will kick, a small amount of fuel will get in, they're blocked, no more fuel gets in, engine conks out. Okay, so clean everything out and clean down the cloth. This one isn't too bad. I'm going to just make sure everything is cleared out, and then we need to get our cloth and clean out our bowl, which I've already done. And one of the most important things to do is this brass nut that goes in the bottom. There's a tiny hole here. We gotta clean that. Gotta make sure that that's get our compressor, get a piece of wire and clear that out. So let's go to assembly. First thing we need to do is put the needle back. So just be careful with this. You don't want to damage that needle. And okay, it's made of metal, but just be gentle with it. And get your pin and put it back. Okay, so you should be able to move like that there, so that's fine. Next thing we do, put back the bowl and the brass nut. And apply liberal amounts of WD-40. It will not do any harm here. It'll burn off very quickly. Need to tighten that up, it's just hand tight at the moment. Now if you've got a engine with a choke or a primer button, you need to make sure here on the gasket that there is nothing blocking it. Now there is none on this, so it doesn't matter, but there's a little hole here. So basically the fuel comes in from the primer button. It goes in through a hole here, and that squirts the fuel into the carburetor, so it allows the to start the engine easier. Now it actually is the same gasket because there's a hole here, but the metal there is none, so I don't really need to mind if this is blocked or not. But just if you have one with a plunger, be sure that that hole is not blocked. If it is, your primer won't work. So now let's go for a reassembly. So to get it back on, first thing we need to do is put back the throttle wire. So it just goes into the hole, just twiddle it about, and there's a little, the stop start mechanism that goes up in through there, and push the carburetor up against the engine block. Okay, next bit is a small bit fiddly. We need to put the bolts back in. This isn't magnetic, so it just makes it a small bit fiddly, as you can see. Just going to put them in here, move that fuel out of the way. So, need to push in that, like so. Tighten up. I'm sure there's torque settings for these. I'm not too worried, just so long as it's good and tight. Like that. And tighten up the other side to line things. This is the most awkward part. There isn't a lot of space here. And that's fine. Let's retighten this one, and that's okay. Now we need to put back on the air filter unit, and there's actually a little pipe here as well which disconnects when you pull it off. So just push that back on again, and actually before I do that, because it's easier to do right now, let's put the fuel line back on. Okay. And be sure you put the clip back. That. Don't want to release the fuel just yet. So we put the air filter mechanism back in. This is quite a snug fit, so just need to work it in place. Screws to go back in. Okay. That's fine. And the third one. Just tighten them up. That's it, done. Can release the fuel line now. And just watch out for drips in case you cause a leak. Actually, I never tightened the brass button. Do that now. Not too tight, it's brass after all. Okay, next we will put the filter back on. And tighten it in place. Okay, and finally we got the plastic cover. And we screw that. Screw that down. Okay. So get all our tools. Okay, so let's see if we can start this. So just put the choke on, sure everything's good, and we try and start it. So there we go, and as Guy Martin would say, the job's a good one. And so I recommend you do that. You don't have to wait for the thing to stop working to clean the carburetor out. It's, I don't know, maybe once a year if you're using it a lot, but that's how you will solve a problem with an engine. Briggs and Stratton, or pretty much any small petrol engines. If it starts and cuts out, clean the carburetor.